What's up? You're listening to The Long Game. I'm David Lee Kim, co-founder of Omniscient Digital. And in this Kitchen Side episode, I'm joined by my co-founders, Alex and Ali. We discussed the need for strategic guidance in SEO. There's so many people online talking about various tactics like link building, content marketing, updating meta descriptions, but there's so little information on how to actually identify and prioritize different SEO program opportunities. We also talk about our learnings from hiring over the last couple of years as we build out our team and share what we're looking for in one of our next job openings, a director of organic growth strategy. So if you or anyone you know is looking for a new role, please reach out to us. And if you hire the person that you refer to us, we'll send you $5,000. We also get into various tangents about the value of a college education, getting a master's degree in marketing, and all the different ways that you're able to learn marketing and how a traditional background isn't actually something that we look for. Especially when we look at resumes, we don't really pay attention to what university you went to or what you really studied. Those things aren't the things that we're really looking for. So hopefully our transparency is encouraging and helpful for you or someone you know in applying for this role. We hope that this is going to be a helpful discussion around becoming more strategic in SEO and also hiring. The thing that's top of mind for me right now, and this seems to be coming up a lot, at least for the prospects that I'm speaking to, is they're like, hey, there's so much going on SEO. There's AI, there's programmatic, there's all this other stuff that we still haven't done. Like we haven't done really much content. We haven't done any technical SEO. We don't even know if our site is healthy or like if it's performant. We don't know where to start. And that seems to be a common refrain I'm hearing from a lot of folks right now. They tend to be bigger companies that have lots of brand recognition. And I'm thinking, well, this is probably the result of them firing a bunch of marketers and cutting hella budget, which now they're paying the price for. Like, oh, our organic traffic's going down. Wonder why. And so what I've been finding interesting is our thinking that we should become a strategic partner was a pretty good decision. And it's like, we can say it, I think we can say it out loud because that's not like an easy thing to just, anyone can just replicate to become strategic. Like, I think our team does a great job and we have like a book club on good strategy, bad strategy and all of that. But I think we could provide some sort of framework for how some of these companies think about where to invest in SEO. And I have like a super rough one that I can share, but I'm curious if y'all are hearing anything like that in like even with our current clients or with folks that you're talking to outside of the company.
I can go first. Like, I guess it's a mixed bag for me. It's no different than normal. I think there's some percentage of clients or let's talk from a prospect standpoint. There's some percentage of prospects who have strong conviction and know clearly within a lane what they want to accomplish. They just don't know how to do it. And they want us to help with the brains and the arms and the legs of execution as well. That's kind of my favorite prospect because they're like, we know that there is a reward at the end of this pathway. We just need somebody to help us walk this pathway. And then there's some percentage, as there always has been, of companies who are like, we need to grow and we don't know how to grow. And those are usually the earlier stage companies. And then there's like the later stage ones who are like, for lack of a better phrase, we're fucked. Like our traffic is going down. Like we don't know how to fix it. Like we need somebody to kind of like be our plumber. We need somebody to help save the situation. I think it's no different than normal, like at least in terms of like the prospects I'm talking to.
Yeah, I mostly talk to our current clients who are ripe for expansion or they're curious like what else we can do with them. A lot of the folks we work with, I think, have originally come to us, like Alex said, like we want to invest in our content program. We need support with strategy and production output. But once we help build that foundation, build that consistent publishing muscle, there's typically a question of, okay, what else can we do? How else can we grow? Like, let's go deeper or broader. What about our update potential? And that's also, like Alex said, in terms of like plumber, like unclogging like years and years and years of just content teams layering on content. There's duplication issues. And at that point, I mean, we could produce all the net new content that we want, but there's still like a foundation, like a crack in the foundation. So that's typically where we widen the scope and go broader to support there. But yeah, I think for most of our current clients, they come to us knowing somewhat what they think they should do. Maybe we help change the direction a bit, and then we go bigger.
Yeah.
I just thought about my friend Neil, who's in real estate. He told me a story once about, so they're like developers, but property managers as well. And he was telling me a story about a family who just like continued to put chicken bones in the garbage disposal. It completely destroyed their garbage disposal. And that's what I was thinking about when you talked about like the plumber and like unclogging. I was like, some of these companies have effectively put chicken bones in the garbage disposal.
Yes. Yeah. People, I mean, we've had folks come to us that are like, yeah, we wrote like all last year with AI or like using this tool. And I'm like, all right, let's fix that up first before we start building on top of that. Yeah. I like those projects.
Sorry, David, you were going to say something serious?
No, I was nothing about chicken bones down at disposal. But it's interesting because we hear it in two different ways. One is prospects being like, we don't know where to start or where to focus. And then clients saying like, great, what else do we do? And I've had conversations about this with other folks like peers. And I realize that no one really explains how they come about finding new opportunities, either for their company or for clients that they work with. And at least for our case, the framework I came up with just for the projects that I've worked on is like, hey, in organic growth, you have editorial SEO, you have programmatic SEO, you have technical SEO, and it's not SEO, but it's CRO as well. Like maybe you've done all these things, but nothing's converting. And then within each of those buckets, there's going to be like different types of editorial. Maybe instead of doing content for SEO, you're doing more thought leadership to balance out the portfolio and like differentiate your brand or whatever. In programmatic, it might be produce a ton of blog content. It might be getting more out of like your directory of integrations. It might be like creating a whole new asset. It might be templates like ClickUp. And in technical is just like, hey, maybe you have a bunch of subdomains being crawled and that's like weighing down your site. You don't even realize that it's being crawled, which has happened with one of our clients. We're like, what are these 20 subdomains being crawled? Do you know what these are? And they're like, I've never seen of those. No one's ever talked about them. And I'm still trying to get them to like dig into that because it's taking up like millions of page crawls. And I'm like, your website doesn't have millions of pages. Like this is really weighing you down. And so there are these things that you can look at and audit and diagnose to figure out what are the growth levers and what's holding us back. And I think that's probably something we can spend in more detail or like another episode or I can do like a solo episode going into detail on because I'm not prepared to talk about the whole framework here right now. But I think being able to at least have those 4 buckets to look at where do we invest for organic should help a lot of folks listening. Because I think people talk about SEO as a really like amorphous thing, and then they just go into like backlinks and content, but there's so much more to it than that.
I think everybody has their own unique ideas of SEO based on like the background they come from. Like you see a lot of writers take it from the angle of like SEO content. What is keyword? Benefits of keyword, which is like the most myopic way to look at SEO in my opinion. And then there's the SEO dorks who are just like chasing algo updates and like traffic drops and increases and trying to find patterns in the noise. And it's like, that's this other lens, which is like super nerdy and like divorced from business value. So it's very contingent on kind of where you come from as a background. And I think we look at it like a growth perspective. But that strategic advisor thing, that's kind of interesting because I think it's very amorphous. Like, how do you become a strategic partner? It's kind of one of those famous like catch-22 things that people get frustrated about with career growth. Like oftentimes feedback that ICs get is like, we can't promote you because you need to become more strategic. And it's like this concept that nobody ever defines. And like, until you're in that position, you don't actually have the opportunity to showcase your strategic mindset because what you're effectively doing is practitioner tactical stuff. But it reminded me kind of metaphorically of like, so like back to the prospect idea of like somebody who doesn't know kind of what they want. They just know they want to grow. They know they want leads. They don't know what's wrong, versus somebody who knows exactly they have conviction in a certain plan. They're like, we know that editorial SEO is the path. We just need somebody to kind of come up with a plan and hold us accountable or execute on that. It's the same thing with any sort of like coach or advisor, in that like there's a gym next to me and they have personal trainers, and like I'm a person who knows exactly what I want. I'm like, all right, I want to lose 8 pounds and I want to like get to this percentage body fat, and I also want to like maintain my strength. So then that person's going to come up with a plan specific to those goals. But equally viable is somebody coming in and they're like, hey, I feel like shit. I want to feel better. And then that person has to kind of back up one level and say like, all right, well, what are you currently doing? Like what food are you eating? What exercise are you doing now? And then they can help you come up with a goal. And once you come up with the goal, you also can come up with a plan based on whatever buckets that you have, which in fitness would be like, your exercise, your diet, your sleep, whatever those buckets are. And I see the same kind of analog with the SEO buckets, where it's like, in some cases, we have to help prospects or clients come up with the goal in the first place. And then we can choose among the buckets to find the most propitious efforts, the bottlenecks, which would be like technical SEO, and then the leverage points that they have on kind of a strengths and opportunity standpoint.
Yeah. I really like that analogy of like fitness and a coach, because if someone was like overweight and they went to a coach and was like, I want to lose weight, that coach could be like, you can go to Orange Theory 5 days a week and also change your diet and also XYZ. Or they can also just be like, how much time do you have to work out? And they'd be like, not much. Great, just change your diet. And like, here's a diet plan. Like there are different approaches. And I think it's similar when we work with clients. It's like they come to us with an idea of what they want to do. And I think oftentimes we say, hey, actually, that's not the most impactful thing you could be spending your time on. I understand why you think it is, because that's what you're seeing on LinkedIn or whatever. But here's another set of things that you should be thinking about that's more likely to have an impact, but not in a way that you're currently thinking. And I think that builds trust, like telling them what not to do as much as you tell them where to focus too.
Yeah, I feel like we deliver just as much value in helping prioritize as we do like helping diagnose. In these like larger scale opportunity projects you've done, David, I don't think anything that you've delivered in terms of potential programs has been news to clients. Like I think our clients now have heard about most, if not all, of the opportunities. They just don't know how to do it and which ones to do first or which ones to axe. And I think that being able to prioritize and not only help execute, but prioritize and then eliminate is just as valuable as the execution is. Because like nowadays, we talked about this, the being distracted every quarter with a new thing, whether it's your CMO like calling things out or you see some new trend on LinkedIn. Like focus, I think, is pretty underrated nowadays. And I think these projects that we do help give our clients focus and help them feel like, okay, I don't have to worry about these 6. I'm going to focus on these 3. And then we have a game plan for later. Like that alone, taking off that mental burden from usually marketing leaders that have so many other things going on. I feel like that's just as valuable as the results that we drive, both the quantitative and the qualitative benefit. I've seen that.
Yeah, I think this all relates to kind of the next thing, which is one of the things that I've been reflecting a bit on is we've just hired 2 new folks. I think we have a couple more folks that we're trying to hire over the next couple months. And the thing I've thought about a bit is the criteria and profile we look for and who we hire has evolved quite a bit. I'm not sure if you both have thought about that a little bit, but the people we're hiring right now have a very different skill set. And I think like personality than who we hired before. I think it's by nature of the business evolving and having different needs, but it's been interesting to see that, hey, we decided we don't want people who are just pure agency side. We want folks who have in-house experience, like even something as simple as that, which maybe we could have assumed that in the beginning, but I think we decided, hey, let's hire someone who came from like agency background only or something. But do you have any thoughts about that?
What are the relative benefits of hiring somebody who has in-house experience versus just agency experience?
Yeah. So I think what I learned is that the internal dynamics of a company are hard to understand. Like you can understand them theoretically, but you don't know what it means in practice. So I remember we had a team member who one of our clients' job title was like content marketing manager. and another person was like content manager or like writer or something. And this a team member assumed that the content marketing manager managed the writer. And I had to explain to him like, oh no, they're actually peers. Like these are just job titles that people in tech made up to make themselves feel a lot more important or like have a lot more responsibility. They're actually peers. This person doesn't manage anyone. They manage the program and they actually report to like the director or something. And the director is probably the one who's not giving them much direction. But that type of dynamic is, and like understanding of job titles is something so nuanced and specific that unless you've been in that scenario, you don't really know that. And I think that can play out in trying to understand like power dynamics and who's actually driving internally, which are things that maybe agency side, you only get to see a little piece of all that. And you don't get to understand what's happening behind the scenes. But by having that experience, you can see all the names on an email thread and in Slack and stuff and start connecting some dots that you wouldn't have been able to otherwise.
Yeah, some of the ways that we coach up our team or help them mentally approach their relationship with clients is like fractional head of SEO, fractional head of content, or all the above. And I feel like you really don't know what that means unless you've been on the inside of a company and seen what those roles are like and what it is to work with a larger organization like product teams, sales team, marketing leadership, even other marketing programs like performance marketing or all that stuff. I also feel like in-house content and SEO folks wear many hats, a lot of different hats, sometimes just because they have to figure out like, oh, I have to write this schema markup for this one post and I need to Google what the hell is schema and like just figure it out. And I think when you get that kind of experience where you just have to figure out how to get something done, that translates, I think, pretty well into the agency world, especially the way we're building our company, which is like, we are an extension of the team. We do what needs to be done to like execute on these strategies that we build. I like a mixed bag of experience. I think having agency and in-house is ultimately ideal.
Yeah, certainly there's benefits project management wise and multitasking wise, dealing with multiple stakeholders within multiple clients. I think this exists within in-house companies too, but one thing that you learn if you work in-house is how decisions are actually made versus how decisions are made in fantasy land. And a lot of the people that I see, especially who haven't worked in-house, especially in leadership roles, when they post on LinkedIn, they've got fantasy land takes. It's kind of divorced of reality and conflicting priorities and potentially emotions and egos and like which stakeholders have which incentive structures. Frankly speaking, sometimes your incentive structure is to increase headcount, even if it doesn't increase efficiency. There's certain things that like to grow your career within an in-house company are incentivized. And then if you haven't seen that, you think, you kind of shake your fist at the sky and say like, oh, why aren't they like buying into this brilliant idea that I have? But you're missing a whole larger picture of how those decisions are made. And again, this happens within large companies too. Like if you're sort of an IC who just joined, maybe you don't have the same visibility as like director or VP layer or C-suite, especially. And once you do, like when you see like what goes into decisions at those layers, like it's a little disillusioning, but it also brings you some level of pragmatism where you start to understand how you can actually get things done. Because that's the thing about strategy, right? We're reading good strategy, bad strategy as a team. There's sort of, it's like you want to diagnose the situation and come up with the guiding policy, but you also want to prescribe how it's going to get implemented in reality, in the real world. So I think you get more of that angle working in-house. It reminds me of like this whole concept of the hippo, which I think I've talked about on the podcast before, but in the conversion rate optimization, in the experimentation space, there's this idea of the demonic hippo, which is the highest paid person's opinion. So people who are data-driven and run experiments hate the hippo, right? They're like, hey, we're anti-hippo. But like, I wrote a blog post for Convert once, and I made this meme. It was like Harvey Dent, Batman, and it was like you either die an experimentation hero or you live long enough to become the hippo. Which, we're running a business now. We obviously understand that not everything is as simple as like the data says this, therefore we do that. It's a very nuanced thing. So that's my take.
Yeah, speaking of fantasy line, and this is less criticizing and more of pointing out like an example of maybe someone who hasn't had the experience of being in-house. but I saw on LinkedIn someone posted, I actually don't know how we're connected, but they posted the people we should have on your content team: writers, editors, data analysts, data scientists. I'm like, wait, in what world do you have data scientists dedicated to a content team? Like that's not gonna, I wouldn't even do that. Like maybe you have someone who will help. They're like a marketing analyst or something to support, but who's going to pull up data scientists from the product and engineering team to put them on a content program, which doesn't need that at all, to be completely honest. And so,
you know what's funny about that too is it's like it's an embarrassment of riches in that, like, if you did have all of those things, there's probably a paradoxical fact that you would get less done than the team that's leaner. And I don't know why that is. I don't know the psychology underlying that, but I remember at CXL, we had a team of 2, Chanel and I, and we weren't even like full-time just writing. Like we were doing a whole bunch of other, launching CXL Institute, running webinars, doing growth experiments. And we were outproducing and outperforming companies with teams of 20 plus writers on their teams. So it's like, I don't know what psychological, organizational psychology fact that is, but like if you had all those resources, I guarantee you would not produce better or more than the teams who are just like scrappily kind of figuring it out.
it might also be the DNA of the team as well. I remember when I started at HubSpot back in 2015, I was on a sidekick team, which is now known as HubSpot Sales. Our team was like the quote growth team. And we were doing SEO, we were producing content, we were doing link building, we were building out like content pillars and like trying to do PR and all this stuff. We were a team of 5. And then when we got inherited into like the main marketing team and we met the rest of the blog team, we were like, wait, this is a massive team. I feel like we've been doing a lot more. Like we were a lot scrappier. Like we were trying to move fast, a lot faster. And I don't think we were publishing as much volume, but our numbers were pretty impressive. I think, at least for the size that we were. And so I think there is something to not having all the resources that you ideally like, for sure.
No, y'all crushed it. I also freelanced for that team back in the day. I think I told you that at some point. We never met, but that's how I met Towsley and
yeah, small but mighty.
I don't think we connected until later on, though.
No. And then later I was like, wait, your name looks familiar.
Yep. No, I remember seeing your name too, because I was actually, Mark and I both signed up for like the email list and we would read all the content you put out. So
yeah, I still get people like,
you had a couple fans here.
Still have people retweeting some posts. I'm like, that's somewhere like 2015, yo. Ali, you probably get that all the time because you have so many bylines, don't you?
So many requests for links. I'm like, dude, I left HubSpot like 5 years ago. Not really, but yeah, lots of bylines.
Well, has it been 5 years?
I wonder, like, just to maybe double tap on that, I'm just thinking out loud. I wonder if like, sort of like the concept of mathematical permutations. It's not just like,
excuse me.
Well, like permutation of 20 is like exceedingly higher than permutation of 15, because you multiply each subsequent number. So like 1 person to 2 people, 2 people to 4 people, 4 people to 8 people. Like there's multiple people that you have to coordinate within. Do you know what I mean? Like I wish I could like graph this out, but like larger teams don't linearly add complexity. They super linearly do. Mm. So like adding an additional team member doesn't add one new connection. It adds a new connection to each previous person who was on that team. So it's like, as you add more and more resources, you have more resources, but you also have to coordinate those resources in a nonlinear fashion.
Is permutation of 20 like 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 all the way up to 20? Is that what that is?
Basically.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm a words person, not a numbers person.
You're what did Mark Andreessen say is like word cell and shape rotators? Do you remember this meme?
Shape rotators? What is that?
You're a word cell.
Oh, like an architect.
Somebody who can rotate shapes in their head. They're like a STEM person.
Oh. I don't feel like I fit into either bucket very cleanly. I'm like somewhere in between. I'm describing how the shape rotates or something. All right. So we've been talking about hiring. I think we gotta shill that we're hiring for another role. Ali, will you do the honors? Because maybe someone listening is going to be interested of working with us.
We're hiring a director of organic growth strategy, and this person will lead our strategy team. So right now we have our team of strategists that I manage. We all work with very closely. But we're looking to install Essentially someone better than us, really is the truth. Someone who has incredibly high expectations for themselves and their team.
And
Yeah,
I haven't discussed this with David and Allie yet, but I will pay you if you refer us to somebody. It doesn't have to be you, but if you refer us to somebody we hire, I'll pay you. Or optionally, I'll fly you out to New York City and bring you to Carbone.
If the person we hire the person you refer, don't just send us like 10,000 names and call it refer. Yeah, we have to hire them.
If we hire the person, totally. This is performance marketing.
Yes, we will. Alex will personally. I will take the train to New York and have Carbone with you both.
Yeah, this is someone who's really fucking passionate about SEO, organic growth strategy, loves leading teams. This person would manage a team. They would manage all the process. So they would manage a lot of how we work with clients, how we transition clients from sales into client success, and ultimately own the retention numbers. So ton of autonomy, ton of ownership, lots of room for growth here, and room to make commission for bringing on new clients too. So really whatever you want to make of it. And we're a lot of fun to work with. So
what type of people should not apply?
I would like somebody who has management experience and who is not an asshole. So someone who likes working with clients, even the most difficult ones. Someone who doesn't get phased very, very easily, because we work with a lot of different folks, a lot of different size teams, big, small, startups, enterprise. If you're scared of a role where you have to kind of build the path when you walk, as you walk it, this isn't the role for you. This is very much like we're building the plane as we fly it kind of vibes. So you'll be on the leadership team with us, figuring things out as we go.
You want to have the drive to bend the universe to your will to an extent, not to be a passive passenger.
Yeah, driver for sure.
Yeah. We want someone who's like, hey, tell me where we're going, and I'm going to go get a car. I'm going to drive there with you. Like, I don't want to be in a passenger seat. They're like, hey, you're taking the wrong path. Like, there's a better way to get there, or like a better way to do this, and I'm going to help us do that. Versus, we don't want someone who's just waiting to take orders and be told what to do, or like how to problem solve. We want someone who can think for themselves, solve problems, like identify problems and come with solutions and tell us where the future is going to be, versus always waiting. We don't want someone who's waiting.
I have a bias for optimists too. Like, I feel like there's a lot of people in our industry who are so pessimistic and jaded at this point. Like, I find like all of this AI and SEO stuff to be so intriguing. And like, there's so many people, like the SEO dorks that I was talking about before, they're all like whining and complaining on Twitter and LinkedIn, like literally like doing screenshots and like, Google, how can you do this? It's like, we're adults. Let's solve this. It's a problem to solve, right? Like, I like optimists who look at things that are volatile or uncertain and say, oh, wow, that's interesting. Here's a problem that I can solve. Not like, I want to run away from this, like, or complain about this. Like, I like optimists.
Yeah. And I want someone who's consistently making educated guesses and learning from quote unquote mistakes. Like, change is growth for us. We'll always be iterating on how we do work, how we grow as a team. I would love someone to come in and not be afraid to challenge the way we do some stuff if they know they have a better way of doing it and they can explain why and how. Try it out, learn from how it went, and then continue to build on that. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I want someone to come in and kind of build the program. That really excites me.
Sick. We're going to add a link to the job description in the show notes here.
And we travel. We're going to Costa Rica.
Costa Rica.
Nice. Well, one of our millions of listeners will certainly fit the bill. Nobody knows you're a dog on the internet.
I know.
Do you ever think about that? You can just take a screenshot from Ahrefs and say, this is a client, and look at the results we drove. You can just anonymize it. Like how many people on LinkedIn who are like building audiences as like SEO experts, like just do that. I mean, for sure, some, right? It's fucking easy to like fake expertise nowadays. Yeah. Like you can just say you have like, we could just say we're like $100 million company. I mean, people could check that, obviously, but like...
we can just put a bunch of logos in our website.
No, it reminds me, like I kind of get obsessed with these like info marketers. Like, I think you can learn a lot from their tactics, even if they're like unethical about how they go about them. But like, there's all kinds of people who are like, oh, I started this like 7-figure agency, or like, I'll teach you how to do the same, or like, my course makes $5 million a year. And maybe it does, but like maybe it's like 1% profit margin or something like that. Like you could just say numbers. People just say numbers, you know? It's crazy. I'm sorry, I'm veering us way off path.
I had something come to mind recently. Actually, it was from a text from my girlfriend, Lisa. She was like, yeah, I met someone who's doing a master's in marketing. And she's like, what do you think of that? Because she knows that triggers me. I'm like, marketing is not learned in a fucking classroom. So if anyone's listening, considering like getting their master's in marketing because they think it'll help them advance their career, please don't. Like save the $200,000, go like work for an early stage startup or like do a project or something on the side and actually learn how to do marketing instead of wasting so much money sitting in a class getting lectured to by people who aren't doing it.
I'm going to slightly push back on like I agree with you on the master's thing, but like I do think there's merit to studying in university, and I think a lot of so the university system is messed up in so many ways. Like tuition is incredibly like overpriced, and we don't have to talk about like the libertarian argument around government subsidies and all of that stuff. But yeah, obviously the system's like not perfect. But like when people negate the entire value of a university education and say it's like archaic and like useless, it's not like teaching you the up-to-date tactics, like that's certainly true. But a lot of the frameworks that I come with on these podcasts that I introduced in my articles, even earlier when we were riffing on the idea of like content formats, which I don't even remember if this is going to be in the recording, a lot of that came from a class that I took where we studied Marshall McLuhan, right? And like mass communications. So I really do think there's a lot of fundamentals and like structural thinking that you can learn from programs like that and even business school. But that's like do your undergrad and then just get out.
Yeah. I'm definitely not shitting on undergrad. I think it's silly to tell everyone to like not go to undergrad. I'm more talking about like you're a working professional, you're in marketing, and then wondering if you need to get a master's in marketing. Like,
I agree with that entirely. Yeah. In fact, like to the extent that like this is like MBA. So like, I don't want to like offend anybody here, but like the co-founders of the first tech startup that I worked at, they've changed their mind since they grew the company, but we were very early stage. And I remember them telling me like, if somebody came and applied and they had an MBA, they would have said like, they would have been skeptical and they would have thought, what is your decision making? Like, what does that say about your decision making that you didn't just go start a company or like get experience and you chose to do this instead? I know that's not how everybody thinks. I know larger companies like MBAs, but like, I'm just saying this is literally something that the founders of the company that I worked for said. They looked at it skeptically, you know?
I mean, I pay attention to it only because typically like resume design shows education first. And I love seeing where people are from, like what their story is, like where they went to school. I've just always liked that, but I don't necessarily factor it in. Really, truly, I don't really make note of the major unless it's like really different than what they're applying for. And then I'm just curious. I'm like, what led you here? Like, how did you get into SEO is my favorite question for folks that did not major in anything relevant. If it's like a comms or journalism or marketing, English, general business, I don't think there's really an SEO major, but if it's any of those, it's pretty straightforward. But like if it had like somebody I remember applied last year that was like an acting major. And I was like, tell me your story. Like, how'd you end up in this realm? It was kind of similar to you, David, where they kind of were self-taught. I got like really liked it and just kept investing in it. Yeah, I majored in marketing. Don't remember a lick of what I learned. I remember who I met and the case studies I studied. And then my senior year capstone, I started a business. Like I had to build a business on paper and then I ended up actually doing it. And then I sold it. And I don't know. I just feel like I learned way more like on the job than I did in a classroom, but maybe that's me.
How come you don't have like exited founder on your LinkedIn profile?
David, I sold this business for like 5 figures, like low.
You could put like a $1,000 check into a tech company too and say like exited founder, angel investor, something, Forbes 30
I
under
was
30.
like 22 trying to like Googling like P&L template. I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Like I'm sure we learned in a classroom, but like it never actually applied until I started doing it. You know, like that's just.
We did that stuff when we started.
I know. I mean, like,
yeah,
we Googled all kinds of templates. Like we're like, oh, like a. But I had
like template, like multiple finance classes as part of my major, and none of it, like, it did not inform when it was actually on the job, you're at your desk, like, how do I grow this business? You don't go back to your textbooks. Like, you just figure it out.
I don't know. Like that's a good point. Like that's one thing. I don't even know where we're taking this conversation at this point, but it reminds me. First, I just want to say, like, because David and I both smiled at this. Can you imagine how insufferable an SEO major graduate would be?
I know.
Should we create an SEO university and provide as a degree?
Well, according to Google's patent, like this, blah 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 blah.
What would the class titles be for an SEO? Schema markup.
Guest lecturer John Mueller. Yeah, I wrote in our newsletter this week. It was all about the values of a low information diet, and I tied in like sort of a lot of data kind of concepts too, about like when you peek at experiments many times, like there's more variance, thus you can like trigger false positives if you look at it too often and say, oh, it's significant, right? But that also relates to this concept of like, if you have tons of information in your information landscape, there's a lot of it that's going to be noise, and you can look at newspapers from last month and think about how much of it is still relevant today, and you can see that. But I didn't want it to just be like theoretical, like me up on my soapbox. So like the last section was like how to know things, and part of it was advice on like sort of how to find sources and like, you know, look at their track records and skin in the game. Because like I said, people can just throw numbers out. Like they can just say they're an expert. They can say they're the AI guy now. But one of the core sections that I fundamentally am passionate about is I said, above all, do things. Learn to do real things. Because like through that process, that's where you kind of get the emergent properties of strategy, like a strategic mindset too. Like Ali, to your point, like you had studied all of this stuff, but until it came down brass tacks, like you had to do this for yourself. That's when you really learned about it. And then when you start reading your P&L statements, that's when you start to like synthesize the information and be able to come up with like strategic ideas based on that, on those numbers. So I am so bullish. Like I'm just like, just do stuff. Like don't just sit back and consume from the fire hose of information.
No.
Right? Do things.
Yeah, I don't think college is for everybody. Like my husband's family all went to trade school. They're highly successful, but it's just like a different education, different career path. But I will say, going to college taught me how to meet people and how to learn. And those two things have stuck with me forever. And I've just had to iterate on them as I've grown up. So no, I don't think what I was necessarily taught in those 4 years has always been relevant. But I learned how to learn. I learned how to like do hard shit. I learned how to meet people. I mean, I know we all have varied opinions on business school, but I know it's really good networking. Like you meet some really awesome people. But I will also say, this experience with us doing events and traveling and like even on LinkedIn and stuff, I feel like you're exposed to a lot of different people too. So I think it's just what you make of it.
Network for me is always like this idea of like buy it or build it. And like I've always been too arrogant to buy it. Like in the same way, like I never joined a fraternity because I'm like, I'm just going to like figure out how to get invited to the parties. Like I'm not going to like pay to get into them.
Same.
And with like trade organizations and like, I guess we just joined Pavilion, so we're trying to buy it. But like, I'm always like too arrogant, and I'm like, I can just like find a way to meet that person. And I don't know if like I'm making it too hard on myself, but like, I always just think like I'll figure a way to like they're not like
I've wondered that too.
Inaccessible.
They're not inaccessible. Like most of them answer emails, you know.
Also, authentic friendships I feel like last longer, and they're like more fun when it's not through the lens of like the specific, like, oh, this is my connection through this thing. It's like, oh, this is my friend. I met them here. And it goes beyond like the walls of whatever institution you met them through.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to what you said, Alex, about like you have to do things. And that's one of I think maybe a year ago, I might have said something in a pod around like, I don't want to share our secrets. But when it comes to like the strategic frameworks and stuff, I'm like, I'm going to do a kitchen side where it's just a monologue of here's how like we or I approach these projects with like some of the clients that we've worked with and like the actual frameworks. Because in order to actually implement and do it, you need to have some experience. Like the reason why I'm able to tell clients, or like all three of us are able to tell clients, that's not going to work. That's not a good use of your time. It's because we've done a lot of this shit in previous roles and like companies, and we've seen it done by our peers, and we know enough about it to be able to understand if it applies. And so I'm going to do a whole monologue episode, and I've never done one of those. It's probably going to be very uncomfortable on this whole like strategic SEO framework to try to level up how people are approaching this problem, at least a little bit.
I like that. What you reminded me of is this Kipling quote where it's like, they copied all they could copy, but they couldn't copy my mind. And I left them sweating and stealing a year and a half behind. I always think about that. I'm like, I can tell you everything, but like, can't copy this.